Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Todd Kerfelman. I'm a developer advocate here on the games team.
I'm Steve Martin. Is this on? Yeah. I'm Steve Martin, and I am not the actor, and I'm the engineering lead for the games team.
And I'm Dave Santoro. I'm the Android technical lead on the games team.
And so we are all here because of, in spite of our formally vaguely worded title, which we kind of had to keep up for secrecy reasons, hey, where's our slides? What we're actually here to talk to you about today is Google Play Game Services. There we go. All right. So let's start by asking ourselves, what are Google Play Game Services? As many of you saw in the keynote, these are an entire ecosystem designed to support your users' gaming experience. And what does that mean? Well, that means features like achievements and leaderboards and saving your game in the cloud. It means a real-time multiplayer framework on Android devices. It is a new developer console experience that is created to support the whole thing. And it's cross-platform. So you can earn an achievement on your Nexus 7, and you can see it on your Chromebook. I can compare the scores I'm getting on my Android device to what my friend might be getting on his or her iPad. And in case you're wondering why we're doing this, and maybe in particular why cross-platform, I suppose the reason is we want the whole world to play together, which I know is a little bit touchy-feely, kids holding hands around the world. But at a core level, it's really true. All of us on the team are gamers. And by that, I don't just mean that we play games. We haven't had a lot of time lately. It's more that we understand that games are powerful. I hope many of you here are game developers. You understand this. Games can push technology forward. They drive platform adoption. They can fulfill human needs in a way that a spreadsheet application just can't. So sorry, docs people, if you're in the room. We also know most gamers don't really look like this. This guy's a little extreme. There we go, that's better. And so we want to make mobile games more fun and engaging for everybody. And we can do this partly by letting them find good games that they're interested in playing, let them demonstrate a sense of mastery and get a sense of accomplishment, and let them socialize with their friends through gaming, something that games have essentially let players do for thousands and thousands of years. So this, in turn, hopefully helps you as game developers because you get a high-quality, engaged audience that is interested in the games you're producing, and you get some of the big studio features without needing an entire back-end services team to manage your database and security and have pagers when things go wrong at 2 in the morning. Hopefully all of that makes you happy, and having you happy makes us happy. Also, you've been asking for this, and we do listen to you. So we will get into the meat of these services soon. But before we do, let's spend a little time talking about the ecosystem that we have to support these services. We're going to start with Google Play Game Services being social from the start. We use Google Plus sign-in for your identity, which is great because, particularly on Android devices, most of your users are already going to have an account, don't need to create username, password. They're probably going to be logged in. And so clicking that sign-in button is then a 1- or 2-click process to sign up for game services and get into your game. If they're like me, they have their name and their profile picture set up so that their friends can find them, right? And all my friends can find me and challenge me to a game. We don't need to exchange nicknames or code words or aliases or anything like that. And social leaderboards are ready to go. I got 700 people in my circles. The minute I click sign in on your application, my social leaderboards, the most interesting kind of leaderboards, are ready to go. And I can compare scores with my friends, my family, my coworkers, and not just some random dude in a country I may or may not have heard of. And by the way, all those interactive posts, deep linking, app activities, all of the other Google Plus platform features are essentially available for free when you implement game services. So that's nice. We do know that people are more willing to sign in with Google because they trust us and they know that we're not going to inadvertently spam their friends when they perform social sign-in. And so to that end, the team has added some pretty powerful privacy controls. The first thing we do is let the user control which of their friends they let you as game developers know about. By default, this is set to everybody in my circles, but I might, for instance, have my secret second family up in Canada circle that I don't want anyone, even you, knowing about. Oh, so I shouldn't have mentioned it here. But I can basically opt to hide that particular circle when I sign into your application. We can also ask the user who can see their gameplay activity. Again, by default, this is set to public. If I get a high score in a game, I'm generally pretty proud of that. I'm OK if people see it. But maybe I don't want my boss to know how much time I spend playing Rocket Island. So I can opt to make this kind of activity visible only to my friends, or even better, only to my gamer friends. It's really up to me.
All right. So let me start by explaining why being cross-platform is incredibly important to Play Game Services. As you're probably aware, there are a lot of people out there today that own and play games on Android devices. And likewise, there are a lot of people out there who own and play games on other types of devices. Our goal is to enable everyone to play with who they want, not just folks who have a particular type of device in their pocket. This is why being accessible on any platform is incredibly important to us. So let me make that a little more concrete. The Play Game Services are implemented as a RESTful API. What that means is that you can access them from any connected device: phones, tablets, desktop computers, printers, probably microwaves. No platforms excluded. We're offering generated libraries in lots of different languages, in addition to custom libraries specifically geared towards mobile games. So let's talk more about those custom libraries. Oops. Our custom libraries are specifically built for iOS and Android. We recognize these as the common use cases at the moment. The libraries simplify development by taking care of a lot of details. So for example, some of the nasty edge cases in OAuth 2.0, and I'm sure there's some people out there who know what I'm talking about. The libraries also offer a lot of extra good stuff. So for example, auto retry if your gamer happens to go into a tunnel, error handling and trapping, a whole set of UX widgets that you can drop right into your game. Also caching to reduce network use and prevent your game from draining the battery. All the code samples in this presentation use these libraries, and you should as well. So as you probably expect, library integration differs between iOS and Android. On iOS, you download a framework, and then you add it to your project. Every time you update that framework, you need to publish a new app update, which your users need to go and get and install. This is standard, well understood, the lifecycle flow for an iOS application. On Android, we have a thin client that talks to an on-device service. The client library is in the Android SDK, which you see here in the lower right. The core functionality for Play Game Services is in Google Play Services, and this service is being updated on all your gamers' phones, even as we speak here today. So what does this mean? Well, it means that Play Game Services updates and bug fixes will be automatically distributed to all your gamers without them having to do anything. We really like this design because we think it's going to be a great benefit to both developers and your gamers. So there are many other benefits to integrating Play Game Services on Android, and one of them is the introduction of additional anti-piracy protection for games that are distributed through the Play Store. I love that. All right, so the games team shares your concerns about the impact of piracy on games. I mean, not every Android game has to be free to play. I mean, we'd much rather you guys had a choice in the matter. So how does this work? Well, our backend server can detect when a player hasn't downloaded the game from the Play Store, and we can return an error to the game if you so choose. And then you can decide what your game does next. This means you can choose whether or not to let pirated games use Play Game Services. So for example, multiplayer. You can choose a pirated game to not let it use multiplayer features. You can turn this on or off via our developer tools, and we'll be getting into that more in just a second. Play Game Services also brings significant enhancements to discovery, and one of these is the introduction of badging in the Play Store. This highlights games that use Play Game Services that a gamer might find interesting. So for example, this game uses leaderboards, achievements, and multiplayer. This will make it easier for gamers to find games that interest them. OK, so enough intro. Let's dive into an example.
All right. So this is our studio's hot new game, Angry Fruit. This is a game where you help Fruit resolve their anger issues through active listening and deep breathing exercises. And we did check a tomato is a fruit, so it counts. We think this is going to be the hot new game of the summer. However, early play tests have shown that the game has two significant issues. First, nobody's really trying out blended fruit mode. We don't know why. Maybe it's the name. Maybe they can't find it in the menu. Second, endless mode isn't retaining particularly well. People do try it, but then they kind of give up after one or two plays. So let's think about how we would solve these problems by adding some Google Play Game Services love. And the first thing we need to do is visit the new Google Play Developer Console. You might recognize this console if you've uploaded or published any Android games in the past. And if you're here at Google I/O in the Android track, I'm guessing maybe you have. What might be new, however, is this little controller icon here on the left. There it is. So following this will take you to the new Game Services section of the console. And this is where we could add a new entry for our Angry Fruit game. We would add our game's name and description. We would add a few graphics. And these would basically determine how this game would appear throughout our service. At this point, we could link our game to an Android application. You can link the same game entry to both an Android and an iOS application if you wanted them to share leaderboards and achievements. You could also keep them completely separate. If it turns out the browser version of Angry Fruit is significantly different than the mobile version and we don't really want them to share leaderboards, we can basically have 2 entries and just keep them separate that way. It's basically up to you as developers what you'd like to do. There's a whole lot more, by the way, that this developer console does, including creating OAuth 2 client IDs for you, publishing just to trusted testers, adding localization support, adding seasonal updates, and much, much more. If you are interested, drop by the Practical Play Games Pointers talk that is immediately following this one, but I think over in room 5, so you're going to have to walk. All right, so that was a lot of setup talk. Let's talk about adding some code, starting with the Android version, which is something I know nothing about. So it's a really good thing Dave is here.
Thanks, Todd. So to integrate with our services on Android, the main class you'll be working with is called Games Client. This basically provides the entry point to Google Play services. It handles getting the user connected and signed in and in a good state to interact with your game. And it takes care of basically providing all the access to the APIs that you have through our service. So generally, when you're creating a games client, you'll need to hook this into your activity or fragments lifecycle. We basically want to make sure that you don't keep the service connection around longer than necessary. So the main pattern that we recommend is that you'll create the games client in your onCreate method. And as you can see, it takes 3 parameters to create one of these. You'll need to pass in a context, you'll need to pass in a connection callback listener, and a connection failed listener. And if you're using an activity or fragment, all these can just be the same thing. Next, we'll handle connecting and disconnecting the client. For this, we recommend that you just hook these into your onStart and onStop methods. We just want to make sure they stay symmetrical, so anything you create, you also clean up. Next, we'll handle the connection failure case. So there are a couple different things that could cause connection failure. The most common case is that the user isn't signed in. If that's the case, the connection result that you get back from this call will give you a resolution intent. And all you need to do is launch that intent, and this will take the user through the sign-in flow, get them signed up for G+ if necessary, get them into a good state to use the service. Another possibility is that something more broadly is wrong with the device. So for example, maybe they don't have the latest version of Google Play Services. If that's the case, you can use this Google Play Services util method to get an error dialog, display that to the user, and this will walk them through what they need to do to get into a good state. This may seem a little bit heavyweight, but really all the code up here is just kind of boilerplate, and you won't need to do much different than what this is showing. Finally, we'll handle connection success. If you get the unconnected callback, it means everything is ready to go. You can call any of the other APIs that we support through Games Client. You don't necessarily need to do anything here. Some of our trusted tester games have done things like get the user's name and show it in-game to make it really clear who the user is playing as. But you can do whatever else you need to do.
All right, so before I start talking about the iOS implementation, just show of hands, who here does iOS development on a regular basis? All right, there's a few of you. Everyone else, get them. I'm just kidding. Everyone, check your email or just look at all the brackets. It's up to you. So the first thing you want to do in iOS is set up your GPP sign-in object. This is a process that you've done already if you've implemented Google+ sign-in in any of your applications. Basically, you're going to access this shared singleton instance, and then you're going to set a number of properties on it. You'll set your auth client ID, your default language, and so on. The one thing that should probably look different to you is the scope. And I should look over this shoulder. This is the game scope, and this is obviously for game services. You would use this instead of the plus.login scope. Games is kind of a superset, so you don't need this in addition to plus.login. Once that happens, you would call authenticate. You could either do this through your own game engine rendered button, or if you're using the official Google+ sign-in button, it makes this call for you. At that point, the user will be taken to the sign-in process, and assuming they click accept, they'll come back to your application, and at that moment will be captured here in the finished with auth error handler. At this point, you would check if there are any errors. The most common one is the user clicked cancel. But if they didn't, we'll assume that everything went well. And at that point, you can take your GPP sign-in shared instance, there we go, and you can pass it in to your GPG manager. GPG manager here is for Google Play Games Manager. And this is kind of the master class that handles all of the main game services for your app. You would also add a reauthorize handler, and this basically specifies what to do if auth fails for some reason. 9 times out of 10, the right thing to do is try authing again. At this point, the user should be signed into game services. They'll see a little welcome back Todd message at the top of their app. Results might be different if your name isn't Todd. And at that point, they're ready to go and implement some game services. So let's add an achievement. What do you think, Steve?
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
All right. Good thing.
So we think achievements are super important in games for a couple of different reasons. So first of all, they give players a feeling of accomplishment. I mean, I did something, the game recognizes that, pops a nice toast, I get an achievement. I feel good. Secondly, they give your hardcore players something to aim for. So I got that rare headshot achievement, none of my buddies have it, serious bragging rights. Thirdly, they encourage exploration and repeat play. So I can personally attest to that. I mean, I've stayed up way too late multiple times, possibly even this week, trying to get all the achievements in a particular game. And finally, they can drive player behavior. So your solo player might be enticed to give multiplayer a shot if there's an achievement for it. So achievements look like this in the client UI that we provide. This is the iOS version. You can actually make your own client UI, and we'll be talking more about how to do that later. There are 3 states: unlocked, hidden, and locked. Unlocked and locked work pretty much exactly as you would expect, and hidden lets your game choose when to reveal the existence of this achievement to the player. We have 2 flavors of achievements, what I like to call traditional, which has just the 3 states that I talked about previously, and also incremental, which records additional progress towards an unlock. All the state for these achievements is kept on the server. There's nothing for you to do locally except ask the server. Okay, so if you remember our angry fruit example, we had a problem with it, and that was nobody was trying blended fruit mode. So why don't we try and entice users to explore this mode by adding an achievement? So let's do it. We're going to add an achievement for completing 10 levels of blended fruit mode. We're going to call that achievement Smoothie Operator. So here's how we set it up in the Play Developer Console. First, the basics. You need to give us a name and a description. These are localizable, and we'll be discussing that in a talk later today. These also appear in the client UI that I showed a few slides back. All right, from there, we'll need an icon. We'll need to know the type of the achievement. In this case, it's incremental. Remember, 10 levels of blended fruit mode. We need to know the initial state. So in this case, it's revealed, so the user knows whether or not the achievement actually exists. We need to know a measure of this achievement's importance, and we express that via points. We don't do anything with the points right now, but we have big plans for it later. And finally, where to show this achievement in a list of achievements, and in this case, it shows up first. So once it's saved, bam, you get back an ID. You use this in the code to refer this achievement. And while we're at it, let's add a couple other ones. We'll add a Fruit Whisper achievement for winning the game, and then a Top Banana achievement, which is a hidden achievement for winning the bonus level. So let's hook these up.
All right, great. So we have some achievements. On Android, you hook them up like this. First thing we'll do is create some local string constants. We don't want to be referring to those gnarly strings from the Play console everywhere. So we'll create some local constants here for Smoothie Operator and for Fruit Whisperer and Top Banana, all the other achievements that we've defined. Now we'll build a handler for when a user wins the game. So in this handler, the first thing we want to do is unlock the Fruit Whisperer achievement, because we want to unlock that anytime the user wins the game. You'll notice that in this case, we're calling this without any listener attached to it. This is what we call the fire and forget form of these APIs. Regardless of whether you're listening or not, this will basically go to the service. The service will keep retrying to the server if the device is offline. You don't need to worry about it anymore as a developer. For our incremental achievement, we do care about the result. So in this case, we're going to call the blended fruit, the Smoothie Operator achievement in a mode that contains a listener. So in this case, we call increment achievement immediate, which means we want this to go out to the network immediately, and we want to hear what the result was. We pass in a listener, and we pass in the number of steps to increment it by. So the listeners all look something like this. You'll always get back a status code, and this lets you know basically what happened when you did this operation. Maybe the device was offline, maybe it was successful. You can look at the Java doc for the listeners to see what status codes you might expect and what all those signify. In this case, what we'll do is check to see, was this the Smoothie Operator achievement, and was it finally unlocked? And if that's the case, we'll do a couple of different things. First, in-game, we'll enable the bonus stage for the user, because we want to unlock some additional content for them in response to this achievement. And then we'll reveal the achievement for Top Banana, which they'll earn by completing the bonus level. So how do we display achievements? Whether you pass in a listener or not, a toast has popped up automatically. It looks something like this. If you don't want your pop-up to display at the top of the screen, you can very easily control that. There are some methods on Games Client Builder to let you set the particular view that you want to anchor all of our pop-ups to, as well as which part of the screen you want to display it in. So if you want to show it in the corner or on the bottom instead of the top, you can do that using these methods. It's also really easy to bring up our in-game achievements widget. This is what it looks like on Android. All you have to do is ask the game's client for the achievement's intent and launch that, and you're good to go. So we recognize that not everybody wants to use those, the stock achievement widgets. So we want to have the ability for you to build your own. To that end, you can ask the game's client to load achievements. And in the callback for that, you'll get back an achievement buffer that contains all of the achievements that you've defined, along with the user's progression on each.
Alrighty, so let's talk about achievements on iOS. All achievements, basically, you interact with by creating a GPG achievement object. And you do that by calling this helper class method, achievement with ID, and here we're passing in the NS string. That's the hard-coded string we got back from the developer console. Once we have this, we can interact with it in a number of ways. There we go. We can unlock our achievements by calling our unlock achievement with completion handler method, because we're in iOS and we like really long method names. My handler here is set to nil, but really I should be setting my callback here so that I can check for any errors. I can also find out whether this was a newly unlocked achievement by the user. Again, you don't need to keep track of this on the client. The server will keep track for you. We can we can increment our smoothie operator achievement by calling increment achievement num steps. Num steps is the amount of progress you're making, and then another completion handler where we tell you was this newly unlocked and how much total progress has the user made up until this point. At this point, we decide, hey, this is a newly unlocked achievement. We'll unlock our bonus level, and we can also reveal the previously hidden top banana achievement, which we would do by calling reveal achievement with completion handler. Hopefully, all that pretty straightforward. Notifications are brought up automatically by the library. However, we know that maybe on iOS there are other achievement systems you might be implementing. So we give you the option to hide these notifications if you want. So bye. It's very simple to bring up the achievement widget. It's about 3 lines of code, and this is basically all UI generated by our library that displays all of the user's progress to them in terms of the amount of achievements they've earned and unlocked. And we also have raw data APIs if you want to do this yourself. And so with our achievements done, let's add a leaderboard.
Yes, leaderboards. So we feel that this is a super important engagement tool for developers. And the primary reason why is that it's probably not a stretch to say that most players like comparing themselves against other gamers. And leaderboards can help with this. When they bring a simple, lightweight, competitive element to your game, they'll make your games much more engaging. So we've built 2 types of leaderboards in Play Game Services. The first of these is public leaderboards. And this is your score compared to the scores of everyone else in the world who have also chosen to share their scores publicly. And if you can't make it to the top all time across the entire world, well, that's OK. We got your back. You can try on the other time spans we offer, weekly and daily. So comparing yourself to a list of total strangers can be fun. I mean, we all remember the arcade days where there were lists of unintelligible initials, no idea who these people were. You just know that you put in a quarter and you beat XYZ, and that's pretty cool. Well, imagine instead of that experience, you had a list of people with profiles and names, and these were all people that you actually knew. And furthermore, these are all people that you know that actually have lower scores than you now. So we think that's a much more engaging experience. So we are also adding social leaderboards. And what this will do is let you compare your score to the scores of your friends, your family, anyone in your G+ circles. You can add to your circles on the website or via the apps, and those scores will show up here. And of course, you control your data. As Todd mentioned earlier, if you don't want your scores to show up, well, we give you tools for that. And of course, if you can't beat your friends all time, well, again, we have the weekly and daily time spans. So we're extremely excited about social leaderboards. If the amount of truly ridiculous competition in the office is any indication whatsoever, pretty sure these are going to drive engagement. All right, so back to Angry Fruit. We solved our blended fruit mode issue with achievements, so you remember that. But if you remember, we also had a second problem. And that problem was our endless mode isn't retaining users well. I mean, they come in, they play, they get a score, but they never come back. So let's use social leaderboards to add a little special sauce. Add a little social competition that'll keep people re-engaging and competing with their friends. All right, so let's do this. We'll make a leaderboard for our endless mode. Like all leaderboards, it'll have both public and social views. To start, we'll need a name. We'll need you to optionally tell us how to interpret the scores that you submit, score formatting. We'll need an icon. We'll need to know the ordering for your scores, so basketball or golf order. We'll need optional limits, and what these limits will do will cause the server to reject any score outside the limits that you specify. This is also optional. And then we need to know where to show this leaderboard in a list of leaderboards, and in this case, we're going to have it show up first. So once you save it, you get an ID back, very similar to the achievements process. This is the ID that you use in your code. But before we get to that, let me talk a little bit about how scores are rendered. So you submit scores as 64-bit integers. However, the API returns both the values that you submit and rendered strings. And these strings are there so that you can make your own leaderboard UI with your own list of scores. So here's an example of how this works. As you can see here on the left, we have the English example. The time interprets your values as milliseconds, whereas the currency interprets your values as microdollars, 1/1,000,000th of a dollar. Apparently that's a standard. On the right side, we actually do localize these scores, so a German caller might find these a little more easy to understand. All right, so now let's add our leaderboard to Angry Fruit.
All right, great. So integrating with leaderboards works very much the same way as integrating with achievements. The first thing we'll probably want to do is add some constants to refer to those leaderboard IDs that we got from the dev console. With the leaderboard ID, you can then submit a score, either immediately or using the fire and forget mode. And you just pass in the raw score that you want to add for the user. If you pass in a listener, you'll get a bunch of information back about what actually happened here. So this will include information about what the user's top score is for all the time spans that we support, as well as whether the score that you just submitted is the new top score for the user for that time period. So you can use this to show something cool for the user if you want to. Displaying leaderboards, again, similar to achievements. We have one intent that lets you show the list of all the leaderboards for the game. So this is what that looks like for Asphalt 7 by Gameloft. And you can also show a specific leaderboard by calling getLeaderboardsIntent for the leaderboard ID that you care about. And once again, if you don't like the leaderboard UI that we've created, we provide raw data APIs. So you can load in the data for scores of everyone and display the UI however you want to.
Cool. Thank you. So on iOS, we interact with leaderboards similar to how we interact with achievements, except instead of creating a GPG achievement object, we create a GPG score object, and we associate it with the leaderboard by calling this score with leaderboard ID helper method. You assign it a value, and then basically to submit the score, you call submit score with completion handler. You'll get back in that completion handler a GPG score report, and you can analyze this report to find out whether this is a new daily, weekly, or all-time high score for this user, and if it isn't, what's the previous high score that they need to beat. We let you display a single leaderboard by, again, about 3 lines of code, and we also let you display a list of all available leaderboards if your game supports more than one. We also have raw data APIs available, although leaderboards tend to be a little more complicated than achievements, so sometimes people just go with the built-in widgets. So let's assume things are going well with Angry Fruit. People are now playing endless mode because they want to beat their friends. However, it turns out there's one more problem that we are now seeing. Long-time loyal players suddenly stop playing, and for no apparent reason, and except maybe for the fact that their device seems to have changed. And this brings us to my favorite feature, which is Cloud Save. Might not be as sexy as leaderboards, but it's really my favorite feature, and here is why. Think about how many households out there have a phone and a tablet right now. In fact, show of hands, how many of you have more than one device at home used on a regular basis? Right, that's like all of you. So based on this completely unbiased Google I/O attendee sample, 100% of the world has more than one device. Actually, more interestingly, how many of you have an iOS and an Android device that you use on a regular basis? All right, that is a pretty significant number of you, and I think that number is going to be growing. So now think about it. How many times have you unlocked the first 30 or 40 levels of a game, gone to play it on another device, only to find that you need to start over again from level 1, and said to yourself, wow, this is a fantastic user experience. I can't believe I get to play the entire game over again. I saw one hand. I think he's just raising his hand for fun. So maybe more importantly, how many of you have decided not to continue playing a game as soon as you got another device because you didn't want to have to start over? I know I haven't. All right. So all those hands in the air, those are people that are no longer playing your game. They're not seeing ads. They're not telling their friends about your game. They are not contributing to leaderboards, and they are not buying in-game items, which is a shame, and it's money out the window. And it's a problem that we want to fix. And so for that, we have introduced a very simple cross-platform save info for this user to the cloud kind of functionality. In case you are wondering how this fits into our other services, because we are Google, we like to do a lot of things in the cloud. Cloud Save really is just designed to do one thing, do it well, do it simply. We have other services, like Google Drive, which lets multiple people edit the same file, let you view revision history, lets you save very large files to a folder that can be reshared later. And we've got App Engine, which allows for very complex server-side functionality and database-like storage and cron jobs and that sort of thing. These are much more powerful systems, but with great power comes great responsibility and a little more setup time. So the analogy I like to use is Cloud Save is a little like a cheese grater. Google Drive and App Engine is a little more like a chainsaw. There are a lot of things you can do with a chainsaw. You can cut down trees, juggle, carve ice sculptures, fight zombies. But if all you want to do is grate some cheese for taco night, the chainsaw is probably going to be more power than you need, and you're going to make a mess of your kitchen. So similarly, if all you want to do is keep the user's data from one device to the next as they play your game, start with something simple like Cloud Save. And then as you find your server needs grow and you need more sophisticated functionality, then consider switching to something like App Engine or Compute Engine or some of our other cloud services. We're going to give you a really whirlwind overview of how Cloud Save works. You have 4 save game slots in which you can save data, which in a fit of creativity, we've labeled 0 through 3 because we're engineers. They hold 128K of data each. And these could be used to manage multiple save slots per user. You could also use them to intelligently partition your save data. For instance, if I were making a role-playing game, I could save the user's avatar in, their avatar look in one slot, their inventory in another, and their quest progress in a third. And that way, if my user decides to change the look of their avatar, I only have to upload that chunk of the save file. I don't have to upload the entire thing. So let's see what that process looks like behind the scenes. Up in the cloud, you've got your game's data along with a unique version string. You can think of this like a timestamp or an e-tag. When I want to retrieve this data, I make a GET call, and in the GET call, I specify the save game slot I want. And the service returns that data along with the unique version string. And I store that on my device. So that's fairly straightforward. Now let's say I were to update this data, and I want to save it now. I would send across this new data to the cloud along with the old version string. The service would make sure that those 2 version strings match. If it does, it says, OK, this looks legit. It will update its version of the data, update its version string, and then send me down a 200 code along with the new version string. So let's look at the case of a conflict. Let's say I update the data on my phone, and then I'm also ambidextrous and playing on my tablet with my other hand, and I save data there too. So up in the cloud, there's this new data and this new version string. This time, when I send across my data from my phone, the service will check and see if the 2 version strings match. If it doesn't, that's a sign that somebody else has gone ahead and updated the data while my phone wasn't looking. And the service gets unhappy about that. It doesn't quite know what to do, and so it sends me down a 409 conflict code. At this point, the iOS and Android libraries will go out and will retrieve both sets of data and present those to me, or to you as the game developer. And you'll get sort of the local data, the data you are attempting to save, along with the data that has been updated in the cloud while you weren't looking. And it's up to you to decide how you want to resolve these. Maybe you sort of perform a union. Maybe you pick one over the other. Maybe you give the user a dialog box. Maybe you find some other intelligent way to merge based on your game's logic. It's basically up to you, but that data would then be used, again, to update to the cloud. I know we sort of went through this kind of fast. We're going to be covering this in more detail in the advanced game topics talk that I believe is happening at like 5 o'clock or so. So stick around for that. So let's talk about code and what this looks like on Android.
All right. So to interact with Cloud Save, you'll be using App State Client instead of Games Client. The setup for App State Client looks almost exactly like Games Client. You'll still pass in 3 parameters to construct one. You'll need a context and a success listener and failure listener. And then we also recommend that you hook this into your activity or fragments lifecycle the same way, creating it non-create, connecting it and disconnecting it non-start and non-stop, and so on. If you are going to use both the Games Client and the App State Client, I do recommend that you attend the Advanced Game Topics session. They have a lot of really good tips on how to gracefully interact with multiple clients at once. So once you have a connected App State Client, you can call the sort of methods you'd expect. So we have a load state method that lets you load the state for a particular key. There's a list states method that lets you see which keys you've stored data for so far. And you can update. And as with the other APIs, you can either update this immediately and attach a listener so you can get the response, or you can update it in a fire and forget form and trust the service to get it to the server for you. So conflict handling on Android happens at load time. If you get an on-state loaded listener, there are 2 possible callbacks that could be hit. The first one is on-state loaded. This means everything was fine, the data got up to the server correctly, and you have everything up to date on the device. So there's nothing special you need to do here. If you get an on-state conflict callback, You get into this case that Todd just mentioned, where the data on the server differs from what you have on the client. In this case, you get back the server version, as well as the local and server-based data. And then you can compare those two and do whatever sort of merge makes sense for you. And then to resolve that, you just call resolve state. You pass up the version string that you got from the conflict callback, and you pass up the new data that you want to store.
Cool. So on iOS, you access cloud save data by calling or by referencing your GPG app state model. App state is kind of our internal name for cloud save. Once you get this model, you can load data from the cloud by calling load for key. Key is an NS number between 0 and 3 with a completion handler. And the two most common status messages you get back in the completion handler are either not found, which generally happens if this is a user that has never saved data before. Usually it's a brand new player and you load up some default data. And success, which means, yay, everything went fine. This method does have a conflict handler. I like to think of this more as a heads-up handler. It's basically the service telling you, hey, it looks like some other device, not this one, has been saving data to the cloud. And you might want to just take a look at it, sanity check it, make sure everything is cool, give the user a dialog box saying, hey, we got to reload the interface, something like that. To save data to the cloud, you call update for key with a completion handler and also with a conflict handler. And this conflict handler contains the two sets of data that you will need to work to resolve. This is sort of the local state that you're trying to save and the server state, which is apparently the state that's been updated in the cloud while your client wasn't looking. Again, you can resolve this in a way that makes sense for your game, return it, and then the library will try once again to save this to the cloud, and hopefully then it'll hit your completion handler.
All right, cool. So let's wrap up quickly with one more feature, possibly our coolest feature overall, real-time multiplayer for Android. So this works across all Android devices running Google Play services, which is currently Freo and newer. There are a number of games both out today and coming soon that have integrated with it. The example here is Riptide 2. We actually have that running over in the multiplayer kiosk right outside this room. Please go play it. It's actually a really great game. We actually really enjoyed that quite a bit. The API supports 2 to 4 players. Our client UI, shown here, actually makes it easy to invite friends directly from your G+ circles. You can use our AutoMatcher to fill any empty slots in a match, or create a quick match with nothing but AutoMatcher. Once a match is formed, the Android service in your device creates a peer-to-peer network between the devices. And the network supports both reliable and unreliable messaging, which is available through both message type and socket type APIs. OK, so briefly, I want to talk about how multiplayer invites can actually enhance discovery for your game. I mean, it's a great way for gamers to find great games. So here's an example scenario. So let's say a player in my circles has a great new game, and he wants to invite me to play with him. So he creates a match, puts me in it, clicks play. This causes an invite to get created, which causes, in turn, a notification to get sent to my Android device. So I click the notification. I get taken to the invite card. So I don't know what this game is, but this guy, he looks pretty shifty, but I know him. He's legit. He's a cool dude. So I have the option here to decline the invite if I don't want to play it. Well, again, I like this guy. I'll give it a shot. So I click the other option instead, which is Game Info. And clicking this takes me to the Play Store. In the Play Store, I have the option to learn more about the game, read the reviews, and most importantly, install the game. Assuming I install the game, I can use the notification to get back to the invite card. This time, I'll have the play option, so I click that. And I'm taken right into the game to play the match with my friend. And thanks to my friend's invite, I now have a great game that I can use to play with my other friends. All right, briefly, because I'm running low on time here, if you want more multiplayer, I skipped over a lot of details. Please definitely attend this session later today in room 5. And let's quickly look at the summary. We introduced the services today. I talked about how the services can increase discovery through both badging and through multiplayer invites. Lots of libraries and tools. Certainly, we talked about the iOS and Android integration with a bunch of code samples. And finally, the absolute best part of the presentation was this self-aware summary. If you want to find out more, this is but one of a plethora of talks available at I/O. We have 4 more plus a code lab. This is all online, so I'm not going to read over it. We actually just posted our developer documentation. This is live. Definitely check it out. All right. If you have questions, we have answers, but we're not going to take them here. We're actually going to have office hours for 30 minutes following the talk. You can come find all of us there. Definitely ask lots of questions. We're also going to be around the show for the rest of the week. Please talk to us anytime. We're happy to chat with you. And that is it. Thank you very much.